I woke up this morning with a giant smile on my face, and it's not because I had a wonderful night's sleep, and it's not because I know that I have a good job to go to, but rather we actually have real college football. It's June 1st, which means we're getting past the last couple of days before SEC Media Days. We've had SEC meetings, and soon enough, we're going to get to week one. So welcome on into Sunday Funday. Thank you for joining me today. It's Cole Thompson here. If you haven't already, like the video, hit the ring notification, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we talk college football almost every single day, whether it be on one-off videos, the overtime driver right here on Sunday Funday. Real quickly, make sure that you're following us on all of our social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. And as always, we are proudly fueled by our friends over at FANDUEL. Go visit FANDUEL.com/SECU and join today with $250 in bonus bets when you win your first $5 bet. Lay down $5, win that bet. You're going to get $250 in bonus bets. Super Regionals, the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals, whatever you want. Just make sure that you throw down a little bit of cash. Say your friends at SEC Unfiltered sent you by going to FANDUEL.com/SECU. It's not going to be a very long show, but it is going to be a very jam-packed show. Had a pretty busy morning, had to get things ready for the rest of the week. I'm in a wedding this weekend, so a lot of my attention has kind of been fixated on that. But regardless, I still want to come on. I still want to talk college football with you. The 5-11 model is what's gaining the most steam from most other conferences, including the SEC. Is that the best course of action just for college football? Not for the SEC, but for college football. Because spoiler alert, it's absolutely the best thing for the SEC. My top 10 non-conference games, there's going to be some disagreement here. I really don't care. Go send me your top 10 because I can't wait to hear the back and forth banner. I want to have a serious conversation about Tennessee going into 2025 because everybody seems to have an opinion. Everybody seems to think one way is better than the other. But I'm here to tell you that there is some conversation that we got to have. And then how many actual quarterbacks could finish top 10 in most rankings by the end of the year from the SEC? You start off the season, you know who are the favorites. How many could join that group by the time that we get to December, the SEC championship, and the college football playoffs are upon us? But we're going to get started with the 5-11 model. SEC meetings is done and dusted. People are headed on home. Jim Phillips, Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, Brett Yormark have all had conversations about what is the best thing for their conference. Now that we're expanding to 16 teams in the college football playoff. Now, I don't like it. I know a lot of you that pay attention to the show, a lot of you that have agreed with me are on the same page. But unfortunately, we got to follow the same token of the words of the All-American rejects and just move along. It's going to happen. We have to embrace it. But recently, we have heard that Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, was very adamant about the college football playoff going to a 5-11 format, saying that if this format is the way that we get it done, 5 automatic qualifiers and 11 at-large bids, well, then at this point, it's going to show the most fair competitive balance for every single conference. So the Big 12 is not going to get 2 guaranteed teams in. The ACC is not going to get 2 guaranteed teams in. And the Big 10 and the SEC, they're also not going to get their 4 guaranteed games in. So is this a good thing for college football? Well, for the SEC, it's 100% a good thing. In fact, I would say it's a great thing. Lane Kiffin brought this up on the Paul Feinbaum show, so I hope that you can go back and watch the clip. But he mentioned that if we go to a 16-team model, the 16 best teams, based off of the rankings, those who come up with the format every single year should have final say on what is done. Those should be the 16 teams that go. Okay, so let's just look back at last year's rankings. Miami would have gotten in. They would have been an at-large bid, but they would have gotten in. So you would have had 3 teams from the ACC because Clemson would have gotten the automatic qualifier. You also then would have had in the 3 SEC teams that finished 9-3. Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss. Every single one of them would have gotten in based off of the 5-11 format. Group of 5 schools still would have been Boise State, Georgia, Oregon, Clemson, and then, of course, Arizona State would have gotten the at-large, would have gotten the conference bids, and then, of course, you had the at-large bids. So when you're saying it this way, you're not limiting yourself just to 4 teams. In the new format that has been preached, the 4-4-2-2 at-large bid with the group of 5 getting an automatic qualifier, you're basically saying 4 teams from the SEC are going to get in. And unless there is some roster that had a daunting schedule and went 10-2 and punched its ticket to, really close call, and they just were on the outside looking in, and they were the 4 seed in that 3-6 model, and it was like they lost to the 5 seed, we're not going to count them out because they haven't disregarded the strength of schedule, their conference realignment, their overall roster pedigree. We're going to put them in. But most years, it's going to be 4. And the reason why it's going to be 4 is because of you're going to have one team from the Big 12 that will finish probably in that 10-2 range or that 11-1 range. And maybe there's 3 11-1 teams in the ACC or the Big 12. So they're going to find their way to get on in. So naturally, that would take away one spot from the SEC and the Big 10. But in a 5-11 format, well, at this point, we're only going to look at 2 major things. Number one, the at-large competition outside of the conference championship. That's the thing that I think a lot of people are losing in sight here. If we go to the 5-11 format, we're going to have the SEC championship game still. And so those at-large bids, the Alabamas, the South Carolinas, the Ole Misses of the world, that were sitting at home and not having to worry about anything alongside Tennessee, well, they're going to be fine, happy, hunky-dory because all they're wondering is, do I have to travel to Champaign? Do I have to travel to Eugene? Do I got to go to Clemson, South Carolina? What's my destination? But I know I'm in the playoff at this point because you won't have that round robin tournament that there's the hyperbole proposed deal that's being done currently with the 4-4-2-2-1 format. So we're still going to have that conference championship game, which means that extra loss isn't going to hurt the SEC. But why would Brett Yormark be going out of his way to preach that this is the most fair advantage? Because he kind of has to. Like it or not, ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the ACC and the Big 12, there are 2 conferences that are staying afloat and really still in the college football playoff model because of the SEC and the Big 10. If the SEC and the Big 10 tomorrow said, hey, we want to go ahead and create our own Super League, and we have enough money with backing and boosters to when 2031 rolls around, when Clemson becomes officially free, and Florida State and Miami and maybe TCU, and then we'll throw in a Colorado, and hey, Oklahoma State's bringing in some good money, and Baylor's got some money out in Waco, Texas. We're going to welcome them on in. They can do that. But what they're saying is that if you give us the automatic qualifiers or say that we have the most representation, then we're going to play along and say that you guys actually still belong despite the revenue distribution, the merchandising, the media rights contracts, all those other things that kind of play a factor into it. So the SEC and the Big 10 are really helping out. But when you say it's the 4-4-2-2-1 format, you are limiting the ACC and the Big 12 to 2 teams. Most years, you will never see a scenario where those 3 at-large bids are coming from other conferences. It will be 1 team from the Big 10, 1 team from the Big SEC, and then we can have that argument of where is Notre Dame in all of this? Are they good enough to be in that top 16 format? And if not, who is the next team in line? And some years, yes, you will have that outlier, the Miamis of the world, the Florida States of the world. Maybe it will be a TCU or a Baylor roster. But if Brett Yormark says we're limiting ourselves to only 2 teams, 99.9% of the time, the Big 12 is only going to get 2 teams. So when you say the 5-11 format, what he's doing is he's playing chess. He's trying to defend his conference while knowing that ultimately our teams are going to have to perform to a certain level. Our teams are going to have to step up to a certain degree. And if they do those things, then congratulations. We'll be right alongside Alabama. We'll be right alongside Georgia. We'll be right alongside Ohio State and Oregon and whoever else comes from those 2 conferences with multiple representatives. That's the reason. And some years, yes, the Big 12 will get 2 teams in. And some years, the ACC will get 2 teams in or 3 teams in, depending on what happens with the other 2 conferences. But make no mistake, if you are an SEC fan, and you're looking at the current status of where college football is and what model you should be looking after, this past year is the perfect definition of why a 5-11 format is the exact way you want this thing to go. Because you would have had 6 teams in this past year. And people would be hooping and hollering and screaming from the top of their lungs, why did the SEC get that much representation? Well, because if you wanted the at-large bids, that was why. When you said that you wanted to have the most fair regional best teams available, that way it's a solid point for every single conference. This is what you signed up for. So don't get mad afterwards that now the SEC and the Big 10 They are now finishing with 9 of the 11 spots. And then you can duke it out with Notre Dame in the Big 12 and the ACC, which conference is going to come out on top. I'm not saying that this is the only model that works. What I am saying is this is the one model that where if you are an SEC supporter, you will have more representation. In fact, if I am Jim Phillips, if I am Tony, if I am Brett Yormark, if I'm any group of 5 conference commissioner, I'm kind of making sure that I'm pushing for the 4-2-2-2 model, because if not, I'm absolutely going to have to tell my rosters, get it together, make sure that every single game is quality, and make sure that we are kind of helping each other out, because if not, we're going to be left on the wayside. You can put all your eggs in the Arizona State basket to represent this conference this year. You can put all your eggs in the Clemson basket until 2031 to represent the conference this year, because without them two, we're not going to be going anywhere outside of just that first game where we will probably have a one and done situation unless we're getting against that G5 opponent. Like, review, hit subscribe. Make sure you're following us on all social media platforms at Mr. Cole Thompson as well. That way we continue to have this conversation. I love college football, and I want to continue to hear from you. What's your overall thoughts? Is the 5-11 model the one that you want? Is the 4-4-2-2 model the one you want? Do we even need to go to 16 teams, which we already know the answer to that? No, it was stupid from the get-go, but money, of course, solves everything, including the headache that will become the future college football. Okay, now I've had my sip of water. What are the top 10 non-conference games in the SEC this year? I had somebody recently come up to me and say, hey, I watched your content. You talk a lot about the conference games having such a big impact. What about the non-conference games? Which matchups are you most intrigued for that could have major implications on the future of the college football playoff? Not even in the fact of like it really matters for seeding, but more so one of the teams that you're going up against, they may end up having that spark that kind of catapults them into the postseason conversation. So I didn't want to do an honorable mention list. If I had to throw 2 on here, Syracuse versus Tennessee, I'm really intrigued it now because of no more Nico Iamaleava. It's at a neutral site location. You're bringing in Steve Angeli from Notre Dame. Does that change kind of Fran Brown's offensive approach with Jeff Nixon? Because honestly, there is a lot of pieces missing for the Orange this year. They got to 10 wins last year, but I'm not sold that we're going to see that exact same roster with how much turnover there was. And then Arizona State versus Mississippi State is really intriguing because they are the Big 12 champions, and that really was the moment. I don't know if many of you were watching that game. It was like 1:30 in the morning, but Cam Scatterby was punching his way into the end zone for his 3rd touchdown, and it was about 275 total yards of offense. That was the moment when I started looking at Arizona State a little bit different. So maybe it could be a different feel. Like they don't have that rushing attack out in Starkville, and it's a 3-point swing. Arizona State still wins, but it's a lot closer than what was actually envisioned when the Sun Devils got off the plane at Tempe. All right, so number 10 for me is Florida State versus Alabama. Look, Alabama, I believe, is going to be a playoff threat this year. I think that they are well adjusted. I think that they did a great job, very similar to what Ohio State did last year. They retained the talent that they really wanted to make sure was their foundation underneath Kalen DeBoer. They bring back in a really good play caller and a good offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb. I think the quarterback position is going to be fine. Ty Simpson right now is the guy, but let's just say things go south in the first quarter. I have a lot of faith that Austin Mack and Keelan Russell can absolutely run the offense accordingly. I love the wide receiver room. I also think that they have one of the best and probably most deep secondaries in college football that not enough people are going to be paying attention to throughout the summer months. But when we get to like week 6 or week 7, you're asking yourself, how are they leading the country in turnovers? It's because that they have that group of talent and they've retained a lot of it. But I love this matchup, and I think it's number 10 because I have so many questions with Florida State. The thing with Florida State is I believe that they can be a good program underneath Mike Norvell. I'm not ready to go ahead and sell my stock like my friend TJ Pittenger at College Football Addiction on the Norvell Express train. 13-0, you missed the college football playoff. Your quarterback play was inconsistent outside of what you had with Jordan Travis. Last year, you go 2-10. The problem with Florida State, and the thing that I've wondered about Florida State is, when are they going to get back the identity of what that program is supposed to be? And what I mean by that is, you're supposed to be one of the better recruiting rosters in the Sunshine State. You're supposed to be right up there with Miami and Florida. And honestly, some years you should be surpassing them because of what you have with the revenue distribution and your boosters. The NIL collectors should be helping you out. Mike Norvell has never really gotten into the recruiting aspect of things. He's done a good job of utilizing the transfer portal, but he's had some younger talent that either comes on in as freshmen and now they're going to kind of hit their stride. And then there's other players that are just there, but there's not a lot of traction when it comes to the recruiting aspect of things. Now, I do like the hire of Gus Malzahn. I think that Tony White was one of the better moves of the entire offseason by any teams. That's a top 10 defensive coordinator. And so there's a part of my brain that says Alabama breaking in a new quarterback, it's not going to be a death sentence for them, especially if it's a close game really early on. Doak Campbell Stadium, 3:30 in the afternoon. Like, it is going to be hotter than Satan's underbelly at that point. We know what the weather in Tallahassee is going to be. But if it's a close call, if it's one that's probably just a little bit that feels, I would say, maybe too close for comfort, Thomas Castellanos ends up balling out. There's reason to believe that, hey, Florida State may be in this battle, and there's more than meets the eye when it comes to the Seminoles this year. I don't think that they're going to be the ACC champion or even a dark horse, but if they hold their own against Alabama, maybe that actually says more about Florida State than it does the Crimson Tide, because I believe the Tide are going back to the postseason this year. I think Kansas versus Missouri is going to be one of the most slept-on games by the common fan of college football. Here, let me explain this to anyone outside of the Mizzou faithful, because you already know what this rivalry is. That battle line, when you ever look at a basketball game, like especially Mizzou basketball this year, if they would have been 0-18 in conference play, but they went in to the field house and they beat the brakes off of Bill Self and that Jayhawk roster, they would carry that momentum. This is a fan base that has hated each other on both sides of the line for over a century. They are battles and brews and bolts and breakdowns of this game. And then when it was in the Big 12, Chase Daniel versus, Mark Mangione, like, this was a game that I remember as a kid absolutely loving for the Big 12 culture. And now we get it back. It's going to be at Memorial Stadium out in Como. And it's a bit of a two-way street here. Jalen Daniels and Lance Leipold are back this year. And we kind of remember that this was the moment week 2 last year that Mississippi State lost to Arizona State and the Sun Devils got really hot. And it was a moment everyone started saying, okay, maybe, just maybe, Kenny Dillingham knows what he's doing. And they proceeded to start to prove to everybody they were the bee's knees in the Big 12. It could be that way for Kansas. They got rid of Jeff Grimes as their offensive coordinator. They had an internal promotion with the quarterbacks coach. They also did a good job of bringing in some transfer portal talent. The Columbia wide receiver that they added in, I've spoken to somebody out in Lawrence. He is crushing it in camp. You would never know that he was coming from the FCS level. He is one of those dudes. And then you look at Missouri. They're going to have a brand new quarterback. They're going to have a ton of new pieces on the offensive line, brand new wide receivers, a running back that last year finished with over 1,300 yards and was really good in the Sun Belt, kind of making a name for himself in the SEC, and a bunch of new players on the defensive side, including a former 5-star in Damon Wilson, and they're in their own backyard. If Kansas somehow is able to march on in and get that win, that could be the click aha moment that, okay, Lance Leipold, this Jayhawks team, they actually are a force this year in the Big 12. Do not sleep on them. And if it's Missouri has such a relaxed schedule, and they get to break in all of these new players for 6 games at home. They don't leave the Show Me State until October 18th. They're so locked in, and they have a blessing with the way their schedule panned out to kind of get Bo Bueller up to speed, to get the offensive line up to speed, to get the wide receivers up to speed. There's a lot to like about what could be with Missouri because of the way the schedule broke for them this year, that they may end up being a dark horse in the SEC to go to the college football playoff. But I can promise you this is going to be one of the most hostile, one of the most toxic, and certainly one of the biggest cesspools on Twitter for probably, I would say, 2 weeks leading up to this matchup. Like, who cares who Kansas and Missouri are playing week 1? All eyes are set on what's going to happen out of Faurot Field in week 2. I think Miami versus Florida is another one. This comes in for me at number 8. 2 quarterbacks that absolutely could be the reason why their teams go to the college football playoff. Say what you want about Miami. You can go ahead and kid yourself that, yes, they have Mario, and yes, they didn't do enough defensively last year, and certainly the Cam Ward hype kind of got a little bit out of control despite him being the number 1 overall pick, and they're never going to get the job done. Well, I hate to break it to you. Miami is going to have a decent quarterback in Carson Beck. And I think that they did a good job of bringing in some younger, but also some experienced wide receivers. I love the addition of the BYU player. I think that he's phenomenal as an all-purpose guy. Martin, he's going to be a good fit for what you want to run with Shannon Dawson. I also think CJ Daniels just kind of got lost in the wayside last year at LSU because of what they had with Aaron Anderson and what they had with Xavier Thomas and what they have with Kyron Lacey, that he's going to go back to that Liberty version wide receiver. And I think that he's a really good fit for what Shannon Dawson wants to run. They also brought in the North Dakota State running back, and they have some good defensive pieces. They also got rid of Lance Guidry. They brought in Featherman from Minnesota. That was a top 15 defense last year. And they're going to have the home field advantage. Remember, last season, that game was played out in the Swamp. This year, that game's going to be played at Hard Rock. And I get it, Hard Rock's an NFL stadium, so be it. It still is an atmosphere that is going to bode well in favor of the Canes, especially with it being an early part of the season. But Florida is built different. I am very sold that their offensive line is going to be better than what we're talking about right now. Like, I think that it was decent last year, especially on the left side. I think the right side is going to be drastically improved. They may have the best running back duo in the SEC outside of Texas A&M, and that's being very nice. They may end up having the best running back duo in the SEC. They certainly, for my money, have arguably the best running back in the SEC in Jaden Baugh, and I can't wait to see what he does with this offense. If you haven't heard any of my videos on Overtime Drive or the one-off videos, Dallas Wilson to me is this year's Cam Coleman or Ryan Williams. In fact, I would say he is this year's Jeremiah Smith. 6'3", 205 pounds. The way that you watched him during the middle of spring ball, and especially in the spring game, just winning his one-on-ones, whether it be in the slot, on the outside, good vertical presence, wasn't dropping anything. That's the type of X factor that I think Florida has been missing for a very, very, very long time at the wide receiver spot. So now they have that guy, and they have some really good rotational pieces with a healthy Trey Wilson, and then you got Aiden Izell, you got Vernell Brown, and you got Nashawn Montgomery, a couple of other guys, J. Michael Sturdivant. The defense, I think, is going to be decent, but can you have DJ Lagway live up to expectations? Can Lagway kind of feel that moment? Because last year, we got to see a glimpse of him, and it never felt like the moment was too big. LSU, they win that game. They stay alive just a little bit longer in the college football playoff hunt. He outplayed Garrett Nussmeier. The next game, it was against Ole Miss. Ole Miss wins that game. They weren't going to lose the Egg Bowl. They're going to the college football playoff at 10-2. He had a great drive in the third quarter and kind of allowed himself to say, you know what? I'm cool with being a good quarterback that just needs to go through the basis, and I'm going to win this battle because of how talented I am. And I've seen him up close as a person. Everything that you want in a franchise Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback resides in number 2. He was phenomenal in Willis High School. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year. I think the other thing that you got to really put an emphasis on is that he was a freshman last year that was kind of going through a rotational reps. He'd get some reps with the first team, and then he'd get other reps with the second team. He is the guy now out in Gainesville. People are buying stock into him. They think that he is going to be that difference maker. And so if he does live up to expectations, he ends up being exactly what you want. By all means, I'm telling you, this is the moment where we have to start taking Florida seriously. And I've said this before, and I'll say it a million more times. For 1 second, that Florida can go 8-4. You can believe that they'll go 9-3, 9-4. 9-3, 10-2. Because there's not really a difference in terms of overall roster constructions with the teams that you're banking up against. So if they're able to go into the road environment, and if he can have a game similar to what he did in the second half against Tennessee, I really like Florida's chances. I think that they're well put together. I think Texas A&M, this is going to be the best matchup of running backs that we will see all year, in my opinion, when they go against Notre Dame. I have that at number 7. Week 3, South Bend, Indiana. What is Marcel Reed going to look like? That is my biggest question right now, because he's had an entire offseason to work as QB1. He's been one of, if not the best overall players when it comes to what you want to run with Colin Klein's system. And I think he's going to have the best weaponry that you could have imagined. Mario Craver fully healthy. Imagine what he can be as a vertical threat. Casey Concepcion, I'll be completely real with you. I'm eventually going to release my top 25 for every single position. He's a top 10 wide receiver. And he was a top 10 wide receiver for me last year. He's going into College Station. He's going to be a threat. I think also you got to look at the rushing attack. You got 2 really, really, really proven guys in Amari Daniels and Lavian Moss. And Moss very well could have been the best running back in the SEC before the injury against South Carolina. Then you throw Reuben Owens into the mix. That's a trio of terror, people. Like, I promise you, if Notre Dame's front 7 underneath Chris Ash is not ready for that matchup, all three of them are going to gallop their way into the end zone. Like there's a guy named the Galloping Ghost. He's a famous Chicago Bears player. They will be doing that in South Bend, Indiana, and then doing the Irish jig in the end zone. That's how talented the running back room is. But my other question is that Marcel Reed can just improve as a passer. And I know what you got week 1 and week 2, but I'm saying you're on the road in early September, weather changing. Maybe it's a night game against a Notre Dame team that last year played in the national championship. And in my opinion, is going to have a better quarterback that wants to fit in Mike Denbrock's system with CJ Carr. And you're able to go toe-to-toe with him. And you're able to kind of make sure that you're playing the tempo game and that you're whittling down what's supposed to be the clock and you're winning your advantages on third down. The things that you couldn't do last year. Well, at that point, I can tell you right now, you are looking at a very different Texas A&M team. And I want to stop with the Texas 8-4 jokes. I really do. I think a lot of people are sick and tired of seeing Texas A&M just be middle of the pack, especially the Aggie faithful. This is the moment where you get to do that. And on the flip side, how are you going to be able to attack CJ Carr and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Prince? Jeremiah Love, for my money, is the best running back returning in college football this year. And Jadarian Prince is a top 15 returning player at his position. And they're going to be splitting carries. Did you do enough on the defensive line? I still have massive questions when it comes to this overall thought process. That A&M is going to be much more improved for Mike Elko's defense. I don't think it's going to be terrible. I think it'll be much better on the back end. But Cassius Howell, who's your other guy that you're kind of trusting to be that pass rusher? Something that was a staple of Texas A&M defensive lines when Elko was the defense coordinator. I don't know that right now. If you're able to get after CJ Carr, I'm going to feel a lot better about what Texas A&M is going to face when Auburn comes to town, or when you have to go up against a Florida team, or when you got to go face off against South Carolina or later on in the season. It's one of those things that I think is really, really important to kind of figure out in this matchup because it's such a testament on what the rest of your SEC schedule is going to be like. Clemson at South Carolina, that comes in at number 6, week 14. Rivalries are not going to be left off this list, ladies and gentlemen. There's another one that you know that's going to be on here. It has massive implications. Lenore Sellers was Superman last season, especially in this game. Go back and watch that final drive. How many moments, 16, was your first, second, and only option? He's earned the right to be called a top 10 returning quarterback in college football. Like the way that we talk about Arch Manning, most of our emphasis, I think, should be thrown onto Lenore Sellers. And I get it. I know that people are sick and tired of hearing the Cam Newton comps. I think he's a little bit more of a Vince Young type player personally. But regardless, he's got to show it another year. But he was Superman last season. Now you're going to be going into the ultimate cathedral of chaos, the most underrated college football atmosphere. And you could be sitting at 9-2. A win in this game, and you guarantee your spot in the college football playoff. And what if this is the game that Clemson can't afford to lose? They lose early on in the year to, say, LSU at home. And then the Georgia Tech game at Bobby Dodd Stadium. Not enough people are looking at that one. Georgia Tech is going to be a player this year, despite all they have on the offensive side. Kate Klubnik, I think, is one of the best, if not the best, returning quarterback. I love all three of their wide receivers. It's the most NFL-ready room that they've had probably since 2016, 2017, when Deshaun Watson was there. They also have a very good defense and a great defensive mind in Tom Allen calling the shots. But maybe they lose those 2 games and they can't afford a third strike. Imagine if you get to be the reason why Clemson, who's going to enter this year as a top 5 preseason team, they're out of the running. And what if it's like the unsung hero? Like Mazeo Bennett, you're just waiting to kind of have that breakout game, and Nick Harbor's just not getting off the pace. So here's 3, and he's going for $132, and he's into the end zone 3 times. And that's the reason why the Gamecocks are going to the college football playoff. What if like a Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy has like 4 sacks and a pass breakup that results in a fumble recovery and a scoop and score? That's what could be at stake in the Palmetto Bowl this year. I'm not ready to give up on South Carolina. I am ready to give flowers to what is going to be a very good overall balanced roster in Clemson. But I think that there is a middle ground to where both these teams could find a way into the postseason picture. But you kind of don't want to know what could be in the postseason. Like, you don't want this game to be replayed in the semifinals. What you want is you want to have the bragging rights for an entire year on what you did on your home turf. Do you have a secondary punch alongside with the Norris Sellers? Because you no longer have a Rocket Sanders to pair alongside you. And you no longer have probably, for my opinion, one of the most underrated players last year in the SEC, Josh Simon, as a security blanket. And that defense is going to take a couple of hits. But that doesn't mean it's going to be a bad team. I got fifth, Michigan versus Oklahoma. This is a crossroad game in week 2. And it's so interesting because of both of these teams, I could see the exact same outcome happening, really, depending on this matchup at Memorial Stadium. And it's probably going to be an early kick. In fact, I would have to be a betting man right now. If Fox has a say, it will be big noon kickoff because they haven't. Big noon kickoff with one SEC team. Why not go to SEC country with the former Big 12 team? Do it there. But the result of this game, I think, could be the reason why both of these things happen. I see Oklahoma being a 9-3 roster. I think Michigan could be a 9-3 roster. I think Michigan is one of the most slept on portal classes of the offseason. I love what they were able to bring in, especially at running back with Justice Haynes. I think they got better at wide receiver. I think they added in some good defensive depth. I love what they have in the secondary with the Metcalf brothers coming on in from Arkansas. It's a good roster. And I do think that even though we got to go ahead and say Sharon Moore, he's going to miss 2 games, that schedule, if you've looked at it, it may be worth him missing the Nebraska game because there's going to be so many other matchups where you need your head coach out there. Bryce Underwood being broken in, he ends up looking, as advertised coming out of high school, one of the most polished players in the Midwestern region last decade. Yeah, Michigan's going to have a good sense of going to the postseason. But also, everything falls off the wagon at this point. They can't run the football. They have no number 1 wide receiver. Their secondary is allowing too many explosive plays to a really good quarterback in John Mateer. And now we're saying, just get to a bowl game. We'll reevaluate everything in the offseason on what is Sharon Moore's long-term status. It could happen because of this game itself. But the same thing could happen, I think, for Oklahoma, where you get a win against a really good defense still. It's no longer going to be the elite unit that we saw in 2022, 2023, 2024, but it still is going to be a good unit. And John Mateer just goes off in this game. And he ends up having 360 total yards of offense, 4 touchdowns, 3 passing, 1 rushing. He's averaging 6.2 yards on the ground. And he finds an identity alongside with Jaden Ott. And now everything that you imagine about Ben Arbuckle's offense, the spread formation, the up tempo, the ability to trust your running back in the pass catching game, top 15 scoring, that's all on display. And you're like, holy, who is this Oklahoma? Venables? Venables is the one coaching this roster? No. And that could be your thought process. And then they end up going 9-3, and that's the moment where everything starts to click. And it rattles off a win against Texas in the Red River Shootout. And then you beat Missouri, and then you beat South Carolina, and you're able to hold your own against Tennessee on the road. And so all these things happen. But let's say John Mateer doesn't live up to the hype. Let's say he doesn't meet the expectations that are necessary for this type of game. He ends up taking a further step back. Jaden Ott doesn't run the football, or he's constantly injured. The offensive line underneath Bill Beatonbow is still beaten and bruised, and they end up losing by double digits. Okay, well, now belief has kind of fallen to the wayside, and now we have to have a serious conversation about what does the future look like for this Oklahoma team. Seriously, we got to start having that question about how much longer are we going to keep faith that we have in Brett Venables. It's possible. It is. It's that fork in the road game for both of these teams. And I think it's going to be one of the better matchups of week 2. I think it certainly is going to be one of the more slept on matchups that when we look back in college football for the remainder of the college season, it's going to have some implications. Don't look now, but this may be one of those matchups that we talk about as a definer for a coach. Brett Venables and Sharon Moore. I think Baylor versus Auburn is going to have that same feel. Week 1, this is number 4 on my list. I think Auburn did a great job in the portal this offseason. I think that Auburn fans have been very patient with Hugh Freeze because if they realize that we cannot continue to go down this pathway of mediocrity. We cannot continue to make the wrong hire. So we got to invest in the guy to prove he is the right hire. And they've done that this offseason. I think Jackson Arnold's going to be a great fit for what Hugh wants to run. Eric Singleton wasn't needed, but he was wanted. I think if they added in some really good defensive lineman pieces, some secondary pieces, they're back-to-back top 10 recruiting classes. I think are going to hit, especially defensively with DJ Durkin. They've found an identity. I like their offensive line. But I also want you to realize that this is a Baylor team that had really, really, really good pieces and a really good finish to the end of the college football season last year. Enter Sawyer Robertson. kind of the entire opinion of the season changed. Jake Spavital, he wasn't losing his job. You had the best running back in the Big 12 over the last 6 weeks in Bryson Washington. Josh Cameron, the wide receiver, he ended up becoming a household name in the conference. And now all three of them are back. They've added in some decent pieces in the transfer portal. And Dave Aranda has kind of got that second wind. Like, you know, when you're sitting at home and you're eating some chips and like you go outside and you're like, I don't want to drink anymore. And then like you just get a good fresh breath of fresh air. And then, oh, okay, you know what? I feel pretty good. In fact, I think that I'm ready for the next one. That's Dave Aranda and Baylor right now. They have that identity. They went 8-4 last season, and they believe they can be a sleeper in the college football playoff. Auburn loses this game, all bets are off on what the rest of the season looks like, especially depending on what Jackson Arnold is. Because I think that, honestly, this is a pretty good team. I thought last year they weren't a bad team. I thought when you think, looking back, they had some good pieces. They had an offensive identity. Just part of that identity was being a turnover-prone team. The Oklahoma game, the Cal game, the Arkansas game. You win those ones, you're sitting at 8-4, and the entire opinion of Hugh Freeze going into this year is drastically different. So I think that has to carry a little bit of weight, especially when you're having these type of conversations on what does the long-term plan look like out on the plains. A loss in this matchup may be a reason why you start to wonder, okay, what is that buyout? How can we maintain the buy-in from the fan base? How can we maintain a lot of these young players that we don't want to lose, like a Cam Coleman or say a Perry Thompson or say a Keldrick Falk if he wants to come back for another year? How do we make sure that they're bought in underneath the brand new head coach? And then if you're Baylor, you win that game, you're off to the races, just like Arizona State was last year. 3, I got Georgia Tech versus Georgia. I am fully invested in the Yellow Jackets this year. I know that there are other teams, people, especially that work in this industry, that are higher than them. If you saw my rankings, I had them at number 25. I'm cautiously optimistic. I want to see them in the Clemson game. But I believe that what we saw last season, late in the year, especially in that Georgia matchup at Sanford Stadium, was not a joke. Haynes King can be your quarterback. Jamal Haynes is a top 6 running back in the country. And they have one of the best leaders, not coaches, but leaders at the helm in Brent Key. So they're in a really good spot there. I think the big question is, what were the transfer portal players going to look like? You added in 2 exceptional wide receivers, Eric Rivers and Dane Patterson. I think Rivers is a top 12 wide receiver going into this year. And if he ends up building that rapport with Haynes King really early on, I'm telling you, look out for that Clemson game. You will know if Georgia Tech is going to be a threat in the ACC, if they can make their way to Charlotte this year. I think that also Dane Patterson can be a really, really good complementary piece. And I like what they have at the tight end position. So overall, I'm not ready to say that last season, Georgia Tech, that 8 overtime game where people were kind of mentioning, hey, you know, Georgia can lose this and they'll still be fine because they're going to the SEC championship. I'm not sure it's that exact same level at this point. I think that Georgia Tech can be built to get a lead and then withstand that lead and then continue to keep it on. But I also think that this is Georgia we're talking about. And one thing that I hope to see this year is a complete new feel on the defensive and offensive line. When you look back at the last 2 years, like honestly, Carson Beck, I understand he's now off in Coral Gables. You're starting fresh for Gunnar Stockton. But when you look back at the last 2 years, the one thing that had been missing, in my opinion, was kind of like that bite that you get in Georgia football. Like they'll punch you in the face and then they'll go back for seconds and then they'll say, had enough. Oh, I don't really care. And they'll go a third time. Like that's Georgia in its trenches. And that's what has gotten them to national championships. And that's what's gotten them to the SEC titles. And that's what's gotten them to be the program that we have known for the last probably 9+ years underneath Kirby Smart. So I think that all of that is there. It just needs to be reattached. Now, I'm not saying that you need to have exceptional quarterback play. Have good quarterback play from Gunnar Stockton. Like so many people are selling their Gunnar Stockton stock before it's even necessary, because I look at him and say, you've done this with Aaron Murray. You've done this with Jake Fromm. You've done this with Stetson Bennett circa 2021. 2022 Stetson was a completely different thing. So I'll give flowers where flowers are due. But if you have an average to slightly above average quarterback, but you can run the football, and you don't have to worry about being a top 15 passing attack, and you just have one receiver that can get on open inside the red zone, it's Georgia. You're going to be able to beat up on everybody. You're going to be able to still establish yourself as an impactful force. And people are going to have to remember that Kirby Smart's running the show. He's calling the shots. Everything is fine in that capacity. So don't worry about those little things. It's going to be Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which I absolutely hate, but still could be worse. And both these teams, I think, could absolutely be in the running for a berth to their conference championship with a win here. Like, I'm not ready to sell my stock at all on what Georgia Tech is going to be in the slightest. Texas, Ohio State, week 1. This is not going to affect the college football playoff or the overall, I would say, outlook for these two teams. But what if this is the on your mark, get set, go moment where you feel really good coming out of the breaks and then you make that first turn? It's like running a 400-meter dash. After that first 100, usually you know who's going to be leading the pack. Texas could be that. Texas could absolutely go into the shoe early morning, Saturday, big noon kickoff, and you say, okay, well, Arch Manning just threw for 325 yards. Ryan Wingo caught what? $135. You saw Emmett Mosley have a really good game. Jack Andrews played really well at the tight end position. And now this is an offense that we got to be paying attention to. They could be that. Defensively, they're able to break up on Julian Sain. They get a couple of turnovers. They win in the red zone territory, a couple fourth down stops. And now we feel like, okay, Texas has established itself. I also feel that way about Ohio State. Yeah, Ohio State lost a lot this offseason. No one's going to kid you. They're replacing almost the entirety of their offensive line, both starting running backs, quarterback, one of their key wide receivers who's the all-time leader in receptions, their starting tight end, multiple defensive pieces, their defensive coordinator, their offensive coordinator. They lost a lot. I understand that. But it's Ohio State. There's certain programs that you just kind of give a, all right, feel to because of what they've shown in history about replenishing talent. Alabama was like that for years underneath Nick Saban. Like, you'd have a dude that was a 1-year starter on the offensive line. He'd go be a top 15 pick. And then you get the sophomore that was kind of sitting, waiting in the wings, and nobody's worried about him because of you talk to people around the industry, and they're saying, yeah, Saban made sure that he was ready to go just in case of anything. And he would have started last year for like 9 of the 14 SEC schools. That's the feel that you're going to get from that type of conversation. So that's Ohio State. They still have, in my opinion, the 2 best players in college football. Definitely the best wide receiver in college football in Jeremiah Smith. I like their portal edition pieces. I think that they didn't have to add in a lot, but Max Clare is going to be a good tight end. Like, it doesn't matter if he went to Texas or if he went to Michigan State. He still would have been, for me, the 3rd best tight end in college football. I think that Cardell Tate's a top 15 receiver. I think that Julian Sain could absolutely prove why he has that it factor. Just like he was going to have that it factor at Alabama and probably would have been the starter this year and maybe would have even taken over last year for Jalen Milroe at times because he was a better fit for Kalen DeBoer's offense. Like, any one of those things could have happened. So it's not a moment to where I say, you know what? This team loses. All bets are off for the college football playoff. They're not going to be in the dozen. They're going to be playing in some nonchalant bowl game. They're not going to win their conference. Things are going to go south. It's all good. Like, it doesn't feel that way in the slightest when it comes to this game. But it could be a tone setter. On your mark, get set, off to the races. The winner of this game may end up looking like the most complete team in the sport, and we'll kind of have a good feeling about what their direction is in their conference for the rest of the year. But number 1 is LSU and Clemson. Week 1, I think it's the best game in college football this year. Honestly. Like, I'm not kidding when I say this may be a game that we look back and say, by the end of the year, this was a moment we knew this team was special. LSU, all that money that they had in the transfer portal, that was used to Bryce Underwood, that went to the transfer portal. They got better on the defensive side. I love some of their additions. Like, Jack Pyburn is going to be a 3rd down pass rusher opposite of Patrick Payton, but he is going to make every single one of those snaps count. I love what they brought in at wide receiver with Nick Anderson. I think they're going to have some stability on the offensive line. Definitely going to take a step back, but I think it's going to be decent. I think that you have the right coordinator in Blake Baker, and I think that he's got some pieces to work with. I don't think I've mentioned this enough. AJ Halsey was one of my favorite moves of the entire offseason, and it came as the very last major stepping stone and the last domino for LSU in the transfer portal. I think they could be a top 15 defense this year. That's how highly I like the Tigers. And I love Garrett Nussmeier. I understand that he led the league in interceptions last year, and the turnovers were a problem. I get it. I completely do. But when you also don't have a run game, and you throw the ball 115 times more than Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers, who also had the same amount of interceptions as you, that has to mean something. And you're also the only quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards returning this year in college football. And you beat Ole Miss. And you had some moments where you had ice in your veins with Joe Sloan. And of course, the quarterback year two mantra of what we know about LSU gunslingers. Year one, establish yourself. Year two, win the Heisman. And I'm not ready to say that Garrett Nussmeier can't do that. Like so many others out there, because of its LSU, because it's Brian Kelly. Well, what if Brian Kelly ends up doing what we saw back in 2012 and lead his team to a college football playoff national championship? Isn't that Brian Kelly too? Because if everything is built right now for the Tigers to be one of the best teams, and I'm not talking about just LSU, the other Tigers. And I know that we have a lot of South Carolina fans in the chat. And I know we have a lot of South Carolina fans that watch this channel. I get it. But when you return the most production in college football, and you also have, for my money, the best wide receiver room you have seen since 2016, a stellar defense, and in my opinion, the best quarterback returning in the sport. Year three in the system underneath Garrett Riley. And what we saw last season, where he marched into Austin, his home, against a number one defense in the SEC last season, and was the only player in the sport to throw for over 300 yards. That's got to mean something. They're not a good team for the ACC. They're not a good threat for the ACC. They're a good threat in college football. And it's in their backyard. And Brian Kelly is trying to get, and LSU really is trying to get, this monkey off their back that they can't win in week one. And they march in to that environment against Dabo Swinney with a good defense, with a great offensive line, with a stellar wide receiver room, and they shut them down. You have to start paying attention to what is LSU. And on the flip side, you have to start paying attention to what Clemson is. It's week one. It's Saturday night. All eyeballs should be fixated on ABC as the sun sets in South Carolina for that matchup. Because I truly do believe that by the end of the year, this will be one of, if not the signature game in college football. And it happens to happen in week one. But those are my non-conference games, my top 10. I think it's a perfect list. If you disagree, let me know in the comments section. I would love to hear your top 10. Like, review, hit subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on all social media channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. And make sure that you also go ahead and download FanDuel. FanDuel is, of course, the number one app. The app is safe, free, secure, and easy. Make sure that if you have an account, FanDuel Sportsbook is offering great promotions every day to all users, like profit boost tokens, new features like a parlay hub, build your own game, same game parlay, or of course, choose from one of our popular SGPs already set up for you. If you haven't signed up, right before the NBA finals, right before the Stanley Cup playoffs, right before the Super Regionals, go to FanDuel.com/SECU to learn more. Visit FanDuel.com/SECU. Get in the action with all the offers you don't want to miss. Disclaimer: must be 21 and present in select states or 18 and present in DC. First online real wager money only. $5 first deposit is required. Bonus issued with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expires 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under the agreement of the Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit mdgamblinghelplinema.org or call 1-800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Okay. I want to have a conversation with all my Tennessee fans out there. And really, even if you're not a Tennessee fan, I want to have a conversation with you about Tennessee football. So hold on. I mostly do this so when I clip up this, I know exactly where to clip. What are your thoughts on Tennessee going into 2025? Honestly. Because in my opinion, so many people are thinking the right way, but about the wrong thing. So Tennessee this past spring lost Nico Iamaleava. He's now off in the transfer portal. He's going to UCLA. They bring in Joey Aguilar. And now you're seeing people change their tune on Tennessee football, which again, I can completely understand. You lose your starting quarterback, a guy that's been kind of built into the system, that it's going to be a little bit of a different feel. You don't know what Joey Aguilar is going to be as a passer. But let me ask you, were you really that sold on Nico Iamaleava last year? Like, I'm not saying that Nico wasn't going to get better. In fact, for my money, part of the reason why I thought Tennessee was going to be in that 10-win range is because it's year 2 for Nico. He's going to have time in the offseason to learn the ins and outs of what Josh Heupel wants. He's going to be able to build a better rapport with the wide receiver. He's going to have much more stability on the offensive line, and he's going to be able to kind of take over games because he has to. But it wasn't like last year I looked at this Tennessee team and said 10-2 because of Nico Iamaleava. That guy was so well advertised that he led the Volunteers to a college football playoff appearance. No, in fact, in my money, he was the reason why they lost to Arkansas, and they nearly lost to Florida, and they had some close calls at times against Alabama, and he had his bright moments, but he didn't throw for 4,000 yards like many people expected. He didn't have 40-plus touchdowns the way that some other people did. He didn't lead the SEC in yards per pass attempt or completion percentage, or wasn't even utilized properly as a runner. No, it was a very solid quarterback that at times looked like a young guy under duress, making mental mistakes, and put his team in a position to where your defense had to bail you out. Your running back room had to bail you out. And they run the crap out of the football. They did a good job with having a lead running back last year. I mean, honestly, when you look at what you had in that room, it was literally a one-man wrecking crew. That was your offense. If you couldn't get it going on the ground with Dylan Sampson, it was over for you. And we saw that in the game in the first round of the playoffs. It wasn't because of bad. It wasn't because of Nico Iamaleava. It was because of your defense and your running back room. But here's the thing. Those same problems that you thought going into the year, last year, they're the same problems that you have with Tennessee going into this year. I don't know who is wide receiver number 1. Chris Brazzell, Travis Smith, Brandon Staley? Could we maybe see finally Mike Matthews be that X factor? Maybe. But honestly, even if it wasn't going to happen that way, somebody was going to have to step up for Nico to get better at. Because the defense did lose some talent. Not a lot of talent, but some talent. Some very overall solid names that I think are going to be pretty decent at the NFL level. You're still going to be a good defense. You're always going to be a decent defense, I think, so long as you have your coordinator there. You're going to be able to run the football. But they lost Dylan Sampson. They did. But I'm not doubting Peyton Lewis, and I'm not doubting Deshaun Bishop, and I'm certainly not doubting Star Thomas. And you're telling me that all 3 of them are going to have to make up for what you're losing in one guy who was so run into the ground that he wasn't available for most of the playoff matchup in Columbus? So when I look at this whole Tennessee conversation, Joey Aguilar may or may not end up panning out. He may be that 1-year stopgap guy or like a 4-game stopgap guy until George Merklinger or somebody else kind of steps on up and feels like, hey, I can take over a game. Jake Merklinger or George McIntyre, my apologies. But like Merklinger can now be that dude. But your schedule still is manageable. If Joey Aguilar has the exact same season as Nico Iamaleava last year, and you have a running back room with 3 guys making up for the production of Dylan Sampson, and 1 wide receiver, anybody, and it could be Miles Kitselman at tight end or Ethan Davis at tight end, somebody just kind of steps on up and is like, hey, dude, I got this. No worries. Bailed you out of trouble in the end zone. You need a first down. There he is on the outside, getting you 12, 15 yards. And the defense is not top 15, but still top 25 with that schedule. The way that it bodes out for you, you're still going to be in that 10-win range. So the reason why we have to have an honest conversation about Tennessee is that the sky is not falling. If you thought Tennessee was going to be a 9-win team with Nico Iamaleava, what you're thinking is that Nico was going to improve as a passer. That the areas of weakness last year, whether it was the pass protection on third down or the inability to have a safety net at wide receiver or the inability to have a healthy linebacker, whatever the thing was that you worried about, it's the same thing. If Joey Aguilar improves, if somebody is the number 1 wide receiver, if you can still have a solid run game, then everything that you thought about Tennessee should still be the same. Nico's not the reason that you need to be hitting the panic button. Not even in the slightest. If you're panicking over being a Tennessee fan right now and not making the college football playoff, you should have been panicking already going into this year. Because of what if Nico didn't live up to the expectations? What if everything that we're hearing out of camp and what people are saying over on the message boards, it's all just a bunch of booey. And then we get to week 1 and here comes Syracuse and Nico throws 2 picks. And now it's the 4th quarter and it's a 3-point game and you got to get that third down conversion. Is that really what you thought was going to be your quarterback this year? Because you still haven't played against Arkansas or Alabama or Florida in the swamp, which is an area that you just simply cannot win, or Georgia, or much of other teams, Oklahoma, that's going to be more improved for that matter, all of which are still on your schedule. You're struggling against Syracuse that is 59th in returning production, and your quarterback's the reason why. That's kind of where my brain goes when it comes to this whole Nico Iamaleava conversation, especially with SEC football, especially more so, in my opinion, when it comes to just the name of Tennessee. Tennessee may end up still being a 10-win team. But if they're a 10-win team, it's because of all the things that you want to see from your quarterback that was going to get $4 million and then said, I want more money in NIL or else I'm going to walk. He was going to get better. The same thing can happen with the dude that you're paying a quarter of that to, comes on in from Appalachian State, and everyone else around him just gets better. The same thing can happen. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that if you are a Tennessee fan and you are worried about this season, and you're saying to yourself, well, okay, we put our foot down. Josh Heupel was the guy to make sure that we were fully invested in Tennessee football. You don't want to be here, that's fine. We're willing to accept a 7-5 season. I hope that you carried that same mentality when Nico was here, because that to me is the difference of this Tennessee team. Now, I don't think that Tennessee is going to be bad this year defensively. Last year, I got burnt by continuously saying I don't trust their secondary. After the Alabama game, I had to start trusting their secondary. It got them out of trouble a lot of times. And it was still a weak point, but it was still a good defense. And they're going to have some pieces. They brought in Colton Hood, who I think is going to be a really good cornerback outside of Colorado. Jamal McCoy, when he's fully healthy, is going to be really good. I think that Boo Carter is going to be pretty good this year. They're not going to have as deep as a defensive line, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a bad defensive line by any means whatsoever. So what I'm trying to say here is that Tennessee, in my opinion, still is viewed as a 9-3 team because of they were a 9-3 team with Nico, who was the biggest question mark. The biggest question mark now is Joey Aguilar. So you're replacing the one question mark with another one. That's all it is. If you want to panic. I understand. And I'll talk you through it. I'll get you off the ledge. And we can go sit down and we can have a conversation about what works and what needs to change for Josh Heupel this offseason. And Volunteer Country, know that I'm welcoming you. And I would love to be able to come visit you guys because I love Knoxville. I think it's one of the best locations in the sport. But remember, the panic should be on the same things that you were worried about when Nico was here, not because Nico left. Honestly, it may end up being the biggest blessing in disguise for volunteer football. And we're looking back 5 or 6 seasons from now when Josh Heupel's in his 3rd college football playoff, this year playing for a national championship and saying, you know what? It was always about who was our number 1 wide receiver, not who was QB1 in the offense. Before we get on out of here, I do want to talk about how many top 10 quarterbacks exist in the SEC this year. We're betting at how many quarterbacks can be from the top 10 this year. So I have my list of quarterbacks. Done it for a while. Every single year I come out with it. I currently have 4 guys in the SEC represented in the college for my top 10 from the conference. Garrett Nussmeier, Lenora Sellers, DJ Lagway, John Mateer. Oh, my God, 5. Arch Manning. I have 5. Now, I think that there could be as many as 7 or 8 that make that cut. Those 5 alone, I'm buying a lot of stock into. I think that Garrett Nussmeier is the most polished quarterback despite having the limitations. Yeah, he had a lot of turnovers last year. But you watch some of the moments, 4th and 5 against Ole Miss, ice in his veins, finds Aaron Anderson. He's had an entire offseason to learn another year underneath Joe Sloan. I believe in the factor of, yes, you can continuously see improvements from a passer in LSU. And I'm ready to think that he can get over 4,000 yards, over 35 touchdowns. He's going to have the best wide receiver room that nobody's talking about, and certainly the best wide receiver room to come through, I would say, since Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors was there, something like 2 years ago. But I also think that he is going to be more prepared. I think the Lenora Sellers has earned that respect. Yeah, he had a couple of bad turnovers and a couple of bad breaks. But if he doesn't get injured against LSU, I mean, we're talking about South Carolina going to the college football playoff. That carries as much weight as the Nicky Manwari pick 6 that didn't count. Him not playing in the second half definitely derailed the entire offensive identity, and he was Superman in that game. And the best part about it was when he found out that he made a mistake, he immediately made up for it in a different way. Oh, man, I threw a pick. Okay, no problem. I'm just going to run it 75 yards upfield. Nobody's going to come near stopping me. I'm in the end zone for 6 points. Made up for it. He might get better as a passer with Mike Shula calling the shots. Having Nick Harbor for an entire spring. Having Mazeo Bennett. Having his little brother who's now going to be a part of that wide receiver room. There's a lot of things that could actually bode well in favor of Lenore Sellers. Punches ticket to New York City. South Carolina, winning games behind 16. He's absolutely a top five quarterback in the SEC. Top 10 returning passer. DJ Lagway. Everything that I have heard, everything that I have seen with my own two eyes, everything that I have seen on tape, it screams he could be a top 5 passer in college football and certainly a top 10 passer. Everything that I liked last year, I saw improvements in. Go back and watch that Miami game. Go back and watch that Texas A&M game. Go back and watch that Tennessee game. Go back and watch that Ole Miss game. Every single one pressing mistake that stood out, he made up for. And if he gets better in Billy's system, have an entire offseason to kind of build that rapport. And I get it. He was dealing with a shoulder injury. According to people that I've spoken to, not really that big of a concern. In fact, almost not a concern at all. You get him involved. Now he gets to have a really good number 1 wide receiver. And he gains that confidence. Just like that swagger feel of like, hey, I've probably been the most important player to come through Gainesville since Tim Tebow. I may be the best quarterback to come through Gainesville since Cam Newton himself. And then he was only here for a quick cup of coffee before he left. I know how talented I am. He starts getting that way, he's in a good spot. I think that Arch Manning belongs in the conversation because of even in the small sample size, his tape is really good. Now, I want to see it throughout a 17-game season, which is why I have him in my top 10 rankings as number 10. But I do think that there is a lot to like about him. Now, I'm not saying that, again, he can't end up being better than everyone else here. In fact, for my money, I think he will end up being probably better than at least 2 names that are mentioned on my list right now. And he'll be in that top 5 range. But can he take over games completely? And I don't mean against Mississippi State and against Louisiana Monroe. I mean against Georgia on the road, Florida in the swamp, going up against a Kentucky and Lexington. Can he handle the pressure of what is an SEC atmosphere? And probably that's true. He can. I think that's more than fine to say give him time, but he absolutely can. And it will just give him a few weeks. Give him a couple games. Give him like a drive or 2 at least. And then you'll see, hey, Ryan Wingo's proven out to be a number 1 wide receiver. Jack Andrews was a really good fit. Timing, tempo, and then he feels just starting in his element, especially now knowing that there's nobody kind of pushing him, or especially like he doesn't have to hear fans go, we want Arch, because now you got Arch. He'll be fine. And then John Mateer, the thing is with him, you lead college football in total scrimmage yards, and you have your offensive coordinator and your quarterback's coach reuniting with you at the Power 4 level. I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting that type of swagger and that moxie and that confidence level. And I think that he has one of the higher floors of all the quarterbacks in college football because of that relationship with Ben Arbuckle, because of he's been kind of understanding the ropes of, hey, do this for the last 2 years. Now just do it against better competition. But also you're going to have a better offensive line. You're going to have a stable run game. You're going to have some pretty good wide receivers to work with. I think that you're in a pretty good spot when it comes to that. So those 5 are absolutely in the running for a top 10 quarterback next year in the SEC. But they're not the only 5. I think absolutely you could see Ty Simpson get into that range. 3 years in Alabama, he has been the golden boy. He has been waiting his turn properly. And what if he ends up looking, not Michael Penix Jr.-esque, but like a Kirkland brand version. And he starts building that rapport with the Jeremy Bernard. And then, hey, Isaiah Horton's on the outside. We're going to find him for 10 catches and 122 yards this one game. And, oh, by the way, Ryan Williams, you remember him last year? What he did against Georgia? Doing that on the regular. And so you have 3 receivers that get over 950 yards, and he's leading the SEC in passing yards and passing touchdowns, and he starts winning games single-handedly. 3rd down coverage. It's an all-out cover 0 blitz, and they're sending guy out the middle. And Parker Brailsford misses the defensive tackle, ice in his veins, clean strike. That's the Ryan Grubb effect. Like, that is what Ryan Grubb does with quarterbacks, along with Kalen DeBoer. So I think he can get in that range. I think that you could honestly see Diego Pavia get in that range. Now, Pavia is not going to have the weaponry. Pavia is not going to have the same offensive line. Pavia is not going to have that same overall help that Alabama is going to have in targets, that LSU will have in targets. But he plays with that mentality of Baker Mayfield that just means something, that knows, hey, I don't care the competition. I don't care who's the name that I have to face off against. I don't care who is that player that's standing in front of me. I want to kick his ass. I want to knock him down and I want to break his side. I want to be that guy. And you're going to have to pull me off of him to guarantee that I'm in a good spot. I think you could do that. I can guarantee you right now, there will be a game this year that Vanderbilt wins that it shouldn't. And it may be Virginia Tech on the road at Lane Stadium. It may be against Oklahoma. It may be against Tennessee. I'm not sure, but it will be because of Diego Pavia single-handedly took matters into his own hands. That leadership aspect does count for something when it comes to the quarterback position. And I also think that it's not too late to say, and bear with me, I understand that people are going to go ahead and scoff and roll their eyeballs and say this is dumb, but I think that Gunnar Stockton and Jackson Arnold could be in this conversation. Arnold's going to have the best wide receiver room that he has ever had in his entire life. You have two guys that should at least compete for 1,000 yards this year. On top of that, you're going to have the best offensive line you've ever worked with. And you're going to have a defense that will bail you out of trouble. And you have the mobility and the ability to kind of get told, hey, tuck and run and go whenever you want. So he could be that dude. Absolutely, he could be that dude. And then Gunnar Stockton. If Gunnar Stockton is a check-down merchant, the way that we described Bo Nix last year in the NFL, and just getting the ball off to Zachariah Branch, who gets a first down, and then Noah Thomas, who gets a first down, and then, how about we get a little bit of Oscar Delp involved in that, who gets a first down, and Colby Young, who gets a first down, and then they run the football with Josh McCray and Nate Frazier at the 5-yard line, and they're in the end zone, and they constantly are having a top 20 scoring offense. And he is a completion machine who finishes without 3,300 yards and just builds that confidence of making the right decisions. Being smart with the football is worthy of top 10 status. So I think as many as 8 quarterbacks could be in this running. I think that right now there are certainly 5. I think Sam Levitt deserves a lot of respect. I'm very high on Sawyer Robertson. If you've watched any of my videos, you know how I feel about him. I think that Kate Klubnik is really good. I think Drew Aller at least deserves a little bit of respect simply because of it's year 3 in the system. And then I like Darian Mensah. I think Darian Mensah is arguably the most profitable quarterback because he's going to a program that's going to be fine with 8-4 and he can get that done. Those are my top 10 quarterbacks going into this year. And I think that any single one of them could absolutely catapult themselves in or out. But I think Ty Simpson could do it. I think Jackson Arnold could do it. I think Taylon Green as an outlier or Bo Pabula as an outlier could do it. But I think 5 right now is the right number going into this year. I went way over the time limit that I thought I was going to. I wanted this to be like 45 minutes. We went an hour and 7. So like the video, hit the ring notification. Make sure you're following us on social media. Make sure that you're following me at Mr. Cole Thompson. Check out all of our great work found at SEC Unfiltered. And make sure that you tune into the Overtime Drive tomorrow when Dave and I break down a ton of other things that is going to be at our disposal. We got, I believe it's, who are we on the schedule? We're not Missouri. We're somebody. I think we're Ole Miss, maybe Mississippi State. When it comes to the scheduling, go talk about 2 teams making the college football playoff, how it can happen, and a bunch of other stuff. But until next time, I'm Cole Thompson. Have a good start to your week. Have a good start to June, because remember, we're so much closer to college football actually being back. And have a good start to your life. Really, whatever. You only live life once. Enjoy it to the fullest. I'll find a better ending at some point with that. Bye, guys.